Hey, geographers. After a tough time trying to record this video from the Sheraton Valley Forge Hotel on Friday, I am now coming to you on what was an 85-degree day in October to shed some knowledge on you before it gets too dark out. I didn't bring any flowers out, so I grabbed one of my annuals that still, because of this crazy weather, is hanging on. See how nice and purple it is? Maybe I'll bring it indoors. Maybe it could be our classroom flower. All right, so today we're talking about population dynamics. And I'm going to include two parts of this section, of this unit together for us, because I think the timing is okay. Let's see, first here, let me go backwards. And what we're going to start with is population composition. So we're going to start with population composition and go towards population dynamics, but we can do this. So remember, when we look at population, we have all these numbers, right? You've been doing the data in class, but what is behind those numbers? So when you make those population pyramids, it shows you the age structure of a population, but also the sex structure of a population. What else does it tell you? Well, maybe nothing else unless you include other information. So we know in New Jersey, there's 9.3 million people. That's a lot of people. But what does that tell us? That number alone doesn't tell us anything about the age, the gender, the race, the religion, the job. It doesn't tell us about any of that. So for New Jersey, just for example, so you know, the median age is 39, which is like a healthy median for a demographic, for a population. We're slightly more female in New Jersey. So males might enjoy that or not. And the elderly population in New Jersey is expected to increase by 61% in this 20-year period that we're almost at the end of right now. That's pretty significant. So basically, like, there's going to be more old people, so to speak, in 6 years by a lot compared to right around when you were born. All right, so here's an example of New Jersey's population pyramid. So you see it's fairly consistent that the youth is only slightly larger than the elderly, and it does broaden out around middle age, so to speak. This is actually a fairly healthy looking pyramid. We may want to note, why does it sort of narrow in around the teen years, around the early 20s? Is there something to that? Notice how at the top you see, at the bottom, you see it's almost even males to females, but it starts to change at the top where there's more females to males. That's because for almost every population, by older age, females tend to live longer. So that is a phenomenon that it's good to pay attention to. That's something that could come up as part of an FRQ question or something like that. All right, so these pyramids tell you the age structure, the proportion of the total population in each age group. You see here in the population pyramid. So it gives geographers a good understanding of the dynamics of a population. Doesn't tell you all the intricacies, right? Doesn't tell you class structure, but knowing the age and the sex gives you a good bird's eye view, so to speak, of the population down below. So the sex ratio of a population in general, so not just what you see in the pyramid, but if you want to know a population sex ratio, this is how they came up with it. It's the number of males for every 100 females in the population, right? So you can do that little equation there. So think of it this way. If the ratio is less than 100, that means there's more females in the population. Or if it's just 100, that means it's an even population ratio. If the ratio is greater than 100, that means there's more males. Now, the standard biological level is 105, which means our population is usually slightly more male. And why is that? A lot of that has to do with just sex preferences for children around the world, but that's not the only feature. Is there a biological reason for this? Perhaps. What else could there be? So Geographers here are going to look for patterns, right? Usually you want to see population pyramids that are higher at younger ages, right? That are sort of wider and then narrow. But you don't want to narrow it like too fast and too much, right? Now, sometimes, like you said, it will decrease with age. And as I was saying before, it will usually flip by middle age, where that at that point there's more females. So usually more males in youth, more females in older age. So why is that? Like I mentioned, a big reason could be sex selective practices, and it varies region to region. Also, lifestyle habits are often why females live longer. Can I move this? I don't know if I can move that. But geographers can look at this, right? So maybe males are in more dangerous jobs, or maybe they just don't eat as well. So things like those kind of lifestyle habits can mean that the females often live longer. So here's some information that comes from the United Nations on sex preferences and why, as a whole, the global population is slightly more male. There's been countries that have passed laws over the past few years that have actually tried to combat this. Because there are some states where, or some countries, I should say, which are states technically, where, let's say, infanticide of females was more common, especially if it was under the one rule policy. Also selective with like IVF, people choosing what gender. Um, there are some countries like Canada, you can't choose the gender if you're getting IVF. You sort of get what you get, partially because of these reasons, so that you don't end up with maybe an unbalanced population. It says here also worldwide 142 million girls are missing as a result of son preference, daughter aversion, and gender-based sex selection. So like missing. Were they murdered? Were they sold into slavery or sex trafficking? Into child marriage? What happened? But it is, a serious issue that the UN and other organizations are trying to combat and have gotten better with time. Hey, why is this not moving? All right. Example of disproportionate gender ratios. China is the highest in the world, 114 males to every 100 females. Once again, a lot of that was because of the one-child policy, where then families were choosing to only have males. That is no longer in place, because eventually with that, you're going to have, if you're can you stop? These kids these days, these teenagers. If this is not the best time to decide to start training the dog, you know what I'm saying? See, I lost my train of thought. This is what you guys do when you start talking in class and I lose my train of thought. See? So anyway, if you have a population that's very unbalanced with more females to males and more males to females, that's going to ultimately change the future population. So you got to do something about that. India also has one of the higher disproportionate ratios. Philippines is up there, but just to show you like the difference. The United States is 104, but remember that's still below the 105, so it's actually pretty much on track. Yes, she got the dog on the check. Okay, enough. So population. Okay, everyone sees the dog. All right, no more snapping of the fingers. Okay, stop. So population pyramids, also known as age-sex structures. So you've been doing this in class. You notice that every cohort is about 5 years. That might change until it's older. Now she's mad and going inside. This is what happens. This is what happens when teenagers don't pay, like you guys and those guys and all these guys don't pay attention and respect their elders. All right. So once it's like 80, age 80, it often changes into like 10-year groupings because the population does decrease so much of that time. So someone had a really good question, like, does the shape of the pyramid matter? And it does. So if you see one that's like to the left, where it's just like a very quick, it shoots up quickly like that, almost like the top of a skyscraper. Someone in class had a pyramid like that. That shows a very rapid growth in population. If it's like the United States one, where it's pretty similar for most of the time and then naturally sort of slims at the top, maybe a little bit bigger for like the really super older folks. That's a slow growth. That is, pretty optimal, I would say. A negative growth where it actually gets wider in cases as it ages. You see, like it's getting wider later in years. That's negative growth. Now, it could even be more negative where it's much wider at the top, which you might see in like Italy, right? That is a concern for a country. Okay, now we're going to get into population dynamics. We're not going to finish this section, but we're going to do a part of it. So there's three factors that cause a population to increase or decrease. We reviewed a lot of these factors as we played the high fructose corn syrup game. All right, so we had babies born, that makes population go up. People die, that makes the population go down, and people move, all right, going to place. That's going to increase some places and decrease others. So the technical terms we have this, so we look at fertility, mortality, and migration. All right, so let's review what we know about fertility. That the crude birth rate is every live birth per 1,000 people. Right? Total fertility rate is the average number of babies per woman. So like today in class, we mentioned that in Nigeria, there was like 5 point something babies born to an average woman in Nigeria. That would be their fertility rate, whereas about 1.5 for most women in the United States or Western Europe. So here's a chloropleth map of the total fertility rate in United States. Because notice we can have number of 1.6 for the United States, but it doesn't show the differences within the country. So here in New Jersey, we look like we're about about 1.7 to 1.79, right? Where some states, go here in the Midwest, you're looking to like more than 2, or it's closer to 2 in some of these lighter pink areas. But some of the darker areas, like in New England, there's less than 1.5 per woman. So even though you might say, is there really a big difference, 0.1 or 0.2? It does show you regional differences in the country, right? Mortality rates. You can look at the infant mortality rate. Well, that's a sad rate to look at. So it's how many babies die under the age of 1 for every 1,000 births. And these are 2 good terms to know. It's not like official vocab words, but as we read articles, be great ones to throw into an FRQ if it's ever relevant, is neonatal and postnatal. So neonatal, you think of like a neonatal unit, or deaths that occur before the 20th day of life. So you think like in that first month. If you make it past that month, but before your first birthday, then it's the postnatal period. So you see in the United States, this is about how the infant mortality rate has actually slightly increased from 1.95 to 2.02. You might say like, that might not be a lot, or a total from 5.4 to 5.6. But if you're a parent of that child, that sure is a lot. And they're saying a big reason this is happening is a result of the Dobbs decision, with some people not getting the proper care and proper maternal care that they need in some situations. I'm sure there's other factors as well. Crude death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 people. So if we look at this recent map, why are there so many deaths in this, Russia and this part of the world? Might be because of war going on lately, right? That's been going on for a few years now. What's going on in Cuba, right? Why are those death rates so much higher? Some countries are doing better than us, though, Canada and so forth. Rate of natural increase. So this is the percentage by which a population grows in any given year. And it has to do with natural things. So births and deaths. It does not deal with migration, right? Least developed countries have the highest percentage. So their population actually seems to grow very quickly. So you see it's higher in most of sub-Saharan Africa, for example, than, say, the United States or others. Once again, this is a chloropleth map. Population doubling time. So how many years does it take for a population to double? So how many years would it take for like Boonton High School to double its student population? So the rate of natural increase is about, if it's about 1.2%, which seems like a very small percent, you normally want your rate of natural increase to be as slow as possible, usually, depending. Because if it's just even 1.2%, the population will still completely double in 58 years, right? And think of like all the infrastructure you need. Like, are you able to make new schools and hospitals and all that stuff in 58 years? To you, it may seem like a long time, but it's really not. Um, so you see here, like how the rate has changed and how doubling, like how early on in the world when there weren't as many people, it actually doubled a lot faster. But now it still takes, this is from 1988. This is sort of outdated data, but it still takes a while. There's some figure I need to find where it's like, if you were to die, which you will not anytime soon, and go to heaven, and all the dead people who ever existed in the world were there, like the large percentage of people would have been alive while you were alive, like a huge percentage. I gotta look that up, but it's just because of this doubling time phenomenon. All right, migration. We know what this is. It's the permanent movement in and out. It's not you visiting. It's not you working for a few months, right? It's you're going someplace and you're staying. What causes this? Well, we know about push and pull factors, but it's also, changes in the environment. There's economics, there's cultural factors, there's political factors, there's a whole bunch of reasons. So I also want to look about the change in population for social factors. So we're going to look at social, political, and cultural. I think we're just still social tonight because then this will be long enough here. So social, think about medical technology and how that has changed population. Maybe more children and even mothers survive birth and the risks in early infancy because of incubators and vaccines and all different things like that. All right, so we have medical technology. Um, we have education. So education, people knowing about how to prevent pregnancy, about what happens with having to be responsible for others, that tends to lower the total fertility rate. Technology in general, right? It doesn't have to just be for staying alive, but technology in general can help with this rate. If you need to move to a safer place, you might be able to do so. If you need technology to maybe make your house flood proof or earthquake proof, right, you can help to do so. If you need cars so you can drive away from where a hurricane is, right? Here's an example from the Morris County Chronicle from over 100 years ago. And it's just talking about when typhus was a big problem. And it's saying, like, how did they treat that? Well, sometimes they didn't have all the right medicines or vaccines, and they were like smoking sugar in a house. And people are saying, like, hey, this is a great thing to do. So if you want to pause this, you can read more about that. I will end this here. So I'm going to finish some more on the cultural and political stuff later. It will be quick, but a lot of this is review. So hopefully it was wonderful for you.